Any comments from the public? Thank you. Thank you, Deborah.
Okay, now we're ready to go to the police department. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Clements if he's going to go over the mission.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. All police departments' core mission is the protection of life and property and the maintenance of order in the community. The department subscribes to the basic principles of community-oriented policing, which is organizational philosophy and problem-solving strategy. Next slide, please. This is not an exhaustive list of the department's services, but certainly the core and mandated ones that I think should be of interest to you. Starting at the top left, directing provisions of quality law enforcement services, ensure organizational accountability at all levels, investigate and respond to all citizens' complaints, work harmoniously with POA and other labor groups, maintain the public's trust and confidence in the police department, recruit and hire, train quality personnel, ensure the fair and impartial enforcement of laws, ordinances, help promote a high quality of life for our residents, provide city manager with staff reports and assistance with design and implementation of policy decisions and anything else the city manager deems that I should do. Represent the town at public and private group gatherings and functions, promote positive working relationships with allied public safety organizations. Our mandated services are to support and implement council policy and direction, enforce state laws and local ordinances, comply with all federal and state mandated reporting requirements for law enforcement, comply with all post-mandated training requirements. POST is California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. Comply with the Public Records Act, comply with Government Code 3300, which is Peace Officer Bill of Rights, and provide 911 emergency dispatch services. Next slide, please. This current staffing is exactly what it says. It's current staffing, and like I spoke the other day at our planning meeting for the town center, there are two things you consider: current staffing, or assigned or authorized. We actually have 12 police officer positions, only 9 of them are for a, if they were filled, we would actually have 25 full-time FTE positions. I'd like to also point out for the public's interest, and I think most council members realize this, that we also have 4 reserve officers, 8 per diem dispatchers, and 3 volunteers. Next slide. This is just a kind of a more micro look at the department. I put that in there for your review. It breaks it down a little bit further. Next slide. These are our major goals. Maintain a 5-minute or less response time to emergency calls. Continue efforts to reduce the 85th percentile of vehicular speed in the town. Support the 3 E's of traffic program management, which is education, enforcement, and engineering. Expand the police department's video surveillance program to include public areas. Continue to educate residents to expand alarm monitoring services. We'd like more people to take advantage of that service we have. Formalize the disaster service worker or disaster council program. Expand community outreach to new residents. When new residents move into our neighborhoods, the police department would like to be one of the first to extend our services to them and tell them about the town. Expand crime prevention and suppression efforts, and keep in mind that a long-term objective would be to have a new police facility to replace our old one. Next slide, please.
I think that's as far as
That's
you
it.
go. Yeah.
One other thing I'd like to, just for information, the police department monitors some 1,500 alarms in your neighborhoods. We respond to approximately 15,000 calls for service. We write somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 citations. and we arrest about 212 individuals for custody arrest, both misdemeanor and felonies. The calls for service do not include monitoring, telephone, and providing a wealth of information to people that call in, both residents and non-residents.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the chief? Once upon a time, we used to boast that we had a 3-minute response time. Whether that was ever true or not, I don't really know, but, that's what, in the early days when I was in this town, we used to read in the newspapers that Atherton had a 3-minute response time. Now, I don't know how we calculate what we should have or shouldn't have, but I'd be kind of interested to have you tell us, how did you arrive at 5 minutes?
That's kind of an industry standard. I think the fire department is in that same category. I know this was carried over from its ongoing objective or goal for the department. So I don't know if it was at 3 minutes. I'd certainly be willing to look into that. But and by the way, that's the limit. Obviously, we'd like to be under that.
The reason that this came up once upon a time was that it said that the average burglar only needed 3 minutes to get into a house, steal, and get out. And therefore, if he didn't get there in 3 minutes, he didn't get him. I mean, that was the logic at one point. Now, whether that's got anything to do with what we can do or we can't do, I don't really know, but it's certainly interesting.
I don't recall 3 minutes,
Yeah.
so, but then I
But you know,
was,
so
as you are.
I remember a similar analogy, but that was from when I first moved to town back in the mid to late 90s, so several chiefs before.
I guess what's reasonable, I mean, what's doable?
That's a really good point. Putting goals up there need to be achievable, need to be based on reality, and not.
It may have been marketing,
Exactly.
Any other questions for
One of the things that maybe I should have mentioned to the city manager, and I'll bring up here, is an ongoing kind of an area is continuing to look at the possibility of shared services with other agencies, and maybe in specialized, type areas. That would apply to the entire town and not to just one department. But its presentation kind of reminded me of that area. I like the idea of new resident contact, and that was another thing I thought about in terms of city manager, is that I think we as a town, town government ought to make sure that, make certain that new residents that come into town are adequately informed and educated or whatever as to things that they should do, and trash cans and all the other things. And then finally, well, I was going to ask Ed, a lot of having the 9 schools, and looking at the statistics in the last council package, the number of visits that were made during February to those schools and so forth. Any idea as to percentage-wise as to how much of the available on-street time is spent at the schools?
Well, I could certainly crunch some numbers for you, Jerry, and get that to you.
I don't know what I would do with it, but I think it'd be an
Well,
interesting thing to.
There's no doubt about it that we gear up for the schools when school starts, and we have we have a lot of calls and issues regarding traffic in schools and kids, and that kind of goes with the turf. But we have a great relationship with all the schools and work hand in hand with them to try to resolve these problems. But yeah, it does take staff time. The officers' time is utilized for our schools and our children.
The only other thing I would mention is that I've briefly brought up to staff the fact, the county now has a fairly extensive bike and pedestrian master plan. And we're kind of in a little island here between larger cities that have bike and pedestrian plans. And I would think that some committee or someone in town at some time ought to be thinking about longer range, particularly when we look at the traffic kinds of things that are forecasted to happen with all these projects that are coming on board. And we look at Marsh Road as a specific area that will have more bikes because of the Gateway Project and Facebook and that type of thing. And I think we need to really get our minds around thinking about bike and pedestrian grants out there. That's one of the reasons we're focusing on that. If there are some projects that make sense for our town, that we could perhaps get some outside money to do something. So I could raise that as a possibility.
Elizabeth?
I had a question about continued efforts to reduce the 85th percentile of vehicular speed in town. Could you just explain to me what that means? Are we in the 85th percentile of people speeding all the time?
No, it's based on our traffic counts and what the majority of people on the road that are traveling, you know, if they're all traveling fast, we definitely want to enforcement efforts to reduce that. So just to bring the speed down in town.
Okay. And then expand the police department's video surveillance program to include public areas. Would that be like at the park or just on the street corners? And if we do add surveillance cameras, do we have to notify residents, like in a public notice somehow?
Well, this is one of the things that I've encouraged staff to take a closer look at, to look at, you know, from the aspect of what security might be in the park, and would cameras at the park be financially feasible, what added value of safety could it add to park, to residents. So we already monitor alarms and also video cameras at private residents, obviously. But I think it's something we ought to at least look at, as we know that we're not going to be adding staff to the police department. Perhaps maybe this technology might be something that we could look into and explore, bring back to council, that, you know, comply with all of the notifications and rights to privacy as well.
So I know that you mentioned we have 1,500 alarms in town that go directly to the police department. It's like 1,500 of our 2,500 parcels, or 2,200 parcels, how many we have. And those are, that's just a free service, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That we provide our residents. And that's I wonder how many people really realize that that's just a free service. And I know that if you sign up for ADT security systems and it goes to their alarm center, it's going to cost, I don't know, anywhere between $30 to $100 a month. So,
When they install the equipment, they often require it to go to their place.
right.
And just in response to that, I think maybe 2 parcel taxes ago, maybe 3 parcel taxes ago, this came up big time. Why are we not charging for alarm services? At that time, we promised the residents that if they passed this parcel tax, we would not charge, because we looked at it from the viewpoint that the parcel tax is tax deductible. And therefore, even if we increased the parcel tax, it would be much better to do it that way than to charge or to have people have to go to some service like ADT and pay it per month. And also at that time, the police department at that time said even though they had a tremendous number of false alarms, they felt that having that and having people have alarms, which they might not have if they had to pay for it, was helping from a crime viewpoint. Now, how much of that is true, I don't know.
Okay.
What Jim just said, I just wanted to ask a question. There's been something written in the press recently about parcel taxes being deductible or not being deductible. Have we ascertained where we stand?
I asked that question.
The city attorney's office will not be answering that question because right now it is a question that depends on the State Board of Equalization and your local county tax people. It's not, you know, there is a complex answer to that that has to do with whether or not a fee is paying for a government service. And that's something we can say when we adopt it, yes or no. But the answer really lies in, it depends on what the state says, and we can't guarantee anything. It's really up to people to talk to their tax professionals who can then get an answer from the counties, I believe, that are, Deborah, is it the counties that are establishing what is and is not deductible?
It
Or
was
is
the
it
tax
the DOE?
franchise board, the article in the Chronicle said
Yeah.
it was being determined by the
Well-
tax franchise board and arguing with the counties and the town.
Yeah, the FTD and the Board of Equalization comes up with this and kicks it back to the counties, but I think the counties ultimately are the ones that are going to be making that determination. But it won't be made at the town level, and it won't be made by me, I
It ought to be
can't.
part of that revenue enhancement analysis, though, in terms of getting some sort of an answer.
The best information we have at the time will certainly come forward.
Okay, Chief, one thing I'd like to have you do some analysis on too is, you know, looking at the amount of overtime our officers are spending, of course, that constitutes, you know, results in fatigue and things like that. And there's a cost associated with overtime versus the cost of adding a head to reduce that overtime. So I think that one of your goals would be to, you know, to do that trade-off analysis. Some overtime is always probably going to be required. You're never going to eliminate it. But exactly where is that equilibrium point? You know, you consider that into your analysis on the head count that you have.
I've done some work on that, Mayor, both when I did a review of the department and the previous chief had done some review. And the number for the sworn, which is where we find the most overtime, is the optimum number is somewhere around 22, 21, somewhere in that neighborhood. There are things that we've done internally already with respects to management oversight that are helping to reduce the use of overtime. You know, taking care of reports the following day if they don't need to turn to immediately. Just applying some good common sense and judgment with respect to when and how we use overtime. The other thing I'd point out too is that when we talk about events in the town and somebody says, well, we'll just send a couple of police officers over there for 4 hours, we don't have police officers sitting around the building to do that. We have to figure out a way to either offset that with reserves or people on overtime, or just hope that it's slow enough that whatever function that the officers are being asked to do, whether it's a fixed post or some other function, that they're able to do that.
Or perhaps we could go to an outside agency and bring them in. You know, I don't know what the county situation is or what type of liaison we have, but obviously we do some sharing. But you know, that's one thing that you might consider along with the lines of what Jerry had brought up as well. So we don't always have to fix every problem internally. Sometimes we have to go external for the most cost effective. But we leave that up to your good judgment. Obviously, I'm not correcting you.
I just wondered if you were speaking to a mutual aid or developing a contract law enforcement service. Because you're not going to give us your people for nothing.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Understand. So I know that there's always the mutual aid, but obviously if we were to have an event in the park, I don't know if that would cover it, but it may be worthwhile for you to consider some sort of additional sharing relationship or whatever with, say, Menlo Park or with the county.
Well, we already have that relationship with Menlo Park. In fact, they help us and we help them. They had a department-wide function. They needed us for a few hours. We went and helped them out. We actually patrolled the streets of Menlo Park. And they've returned probably the favor 10 times fold because they have much more staff than we do, obviously. We frequently find ourselves when we have a serious 2-officer call that were just tied up. And we frequently call on them, Redwood City or the Sheriff's Department to help us out.
Right.
But we don't want to abuse that either, you know, it's a kind of a quid pro quo there.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any comments from the public?
Yeah, lots of a couple of things. First, with respect to the response time, the standards of the fire department, and the record is very good. With respect to our police department, my personal experience has been, you know, it's never more than 3 minutes. And I've always been incredibly impressed when there's we have a guest at our house that triggers the alarm because they don't have the code right, etc. How quickly the police department shows up. You talked about shared services. One of the things I would recommend for consideration is dispatch. The fire agencies years ago, Menlo Fire was the catalyst for it, first organized the South County to do consolidated dispatch. It worked so well that the entire county is now handled by one dispatch center for all fire agencies. And it's interesting, there's sort of a cultural resistance to consolidating police dispatch versus fire dispatch. Fire dispatch worked so well that the next thing that happened is they dropped boundaries and they just started saying, okay, whichever is the closest fire station will respond regardless of the geographical boundaries. And over time it washes out in terms of who responds to which particular location. So it's something that I would urge you to consider. I think if you just consolidated with Menlo Park and Redwood City, you'd have a tremendous advantage in East Palo Alto. And if you then roll that consolidation up further to the county level, the cost of doing it would be significantly less than doing it on an individual agency by agency basis. And even at the county level, it would be less because they've already got the countywide dispatch center there, which does sheriff, and which does all the fire agencies in the entire county. So I think it is worth looking at. On the alarm issue, I would like to just second the comments that you've made. I have, as many of you do, I have a second home. We probably pay about $600 a year for that alarm system. Response time is about an hour versus 3 minutes or 6 minutes. I think it's a tremendous benefit, and I've always wondered why I get it for free when it's not something that everybody in the town has. To me, it's a real simple revenue enhancement thing. Now, I recognize the point that at one time we said something in conjunction with partial taxes, etc. If you add up all the parcel tax promises that we made over the years, there's no way we can fulfill all those parcel tax promises with the current parcel tax. And even if it's a nominal fee, I think it would be very advantageous to the town to have a nominal fee for what I consider to be an absolutely superb service. The last
Since
time
you're setting off your alarm by having guests, maybe we should just charge for false alarms.
well, there was a time I think when we did have a charge for false alarms, and then they decided not to do that.
I know, they do, we don't enforce it.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, there are a lot of seniors in our town that maybe are on fixed incomes, that would be a hardship. So, I mean, if you ever implement some kind of a fee, there would be.
Well, you do that with
something.
garbage cans, you ought to be able to do alarms.
Exactly, right, right.
You know, I think there are an awful lot of very well-to-do people in this community who wouldn't even sneeze at paying an alarm fee, and who basically sort of look at the fact that they get it for free as being a curiosity, you know, rather than something that is offensive. And if there are special circumstances, I'm sure that you can accommodate them. The comments that were made about bicycles and pedestrians and things like that remind me of one intersection that I particularly, I go through it very often, as Jim does, I know. James and Middlefield, I think, is just waiting for a disaster to happen, because you actually hit the limit line after you cross the pedestrian right-of-way. Now, I've been told that as far as the town's concerned, the path alongside the wall is not a sidewalk. Well, I think a legal view would be that something that's been a sidewalk for 20 years is a sidewalk, even if we don't think it's a sidewalk. You cannot pull out of James and see the cars without already crossing the pedestrian walkway where there are kids, there are bicycles. I have come so close to hitting children and bicycles coming out of that intersection, and I'm still behind the limit line. I don't know what you can do about it, but I would certainly encourage you to look at it before somebody gets hurt.
Peter, can I just say, in response to you, first of all, I agree with you on James. I've done exactly the same
It's
thing.
terrifying.
I mean, I'm just about to move forward when a bike goes across, and it's working. But as far as the alarms go, at one point here, we also had a policy, I thought at the time, that your first false alarm was free. The second one was $50, and everyone after that was $100. Now, then I think the police chief at that time, maybe it was Bob Brennan, maybe, I don't know who it was, but he said, well, this is just an administrative chore. We just can't collect. I never did understand that, because it seems to me that it wouldn't be that difficult. I mean, if somebody has 5 false alarms, and I think this is one of the things I've talked to the chief about, I mean, how many of these false alarms are from the same people? I think it would be good, because if they get charged for them, they might have fewer, and therefore it would be less work for the police. And so I think before we actually maybe go to charging everybody, I think we should look at maybe a policy in which it's only the people that are causing the problem that are charged.
Well, one of the unintended consequences of that may be that you lose people rather than gaining people in the system. And I had a very interesting interaction with the police department. They called me up one day and said, you know, we get this message from your alarm system every morning at 6 o'clock, and it's a real pain in the ass to ignore it. And it wasn't an alarm, it was just a, I'm here message. And so I called my alarm company up, and they came out and, they adjusted the system so it didn't send that message every day. I think that one way to deal with false alarms is by dealing with the individuals who have false alarms and figuring out why they have false alarms and trying to get rid of them. But I think charging for the service is a very different issue than false alarms. I would much rather have everybody in the city hooked into the alarm system and charge even a trivial fee for that.
So I just want to say that every spring, my upstairs alarm smoke detector goes off because a spider has made its nest in there. And so the Atherton calls me and says, you have an alarm? And I said, everything's fine. I think it's this one right here. And so I get on a ladder and I poke it and then I call it. So, what can I say?
Yeah, well, I think this is the other thing, Peter, that when I have a false alarm, I don't have many of them, but when I have them, I call 688-6500, give them my number that I've been assigned, and it doesn't, you don't have to send any.
They don't have to dispatch you?
Yeah, they don't.
That's part of an educational issue. But I would just suggest separating the charging for false alarms versus charging for the system.
Yeah.
I think they're different issues. And this may not be the place to go into more detail. I've expressed my opinion.
This is just kind of a goal setting, so let's hold that. The chief wants to say something, but our attorney would like to.
Mr. Mayor, interestingly enough, Councilman Dodge is absolutely correct. We do have a false alarm fee ordinance. It says the first one's free, and after that you have to pay an amount set by resolution. Now, whether or not we have a current resolution is another issue, but in fact, we do have a false alarm fee, and it's Chapter 804 of the municipal code.
We need to review that.
And Chief, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, a couple of things, particularly, well, first of all, let's start with the alarm service. It is not free. You pay for it. You have dispatchers that monitor that 24 hours a day, the same ones you want to, get rid of and go with Menlo Park. We frequently throw out this, one of the outsides, the dispatch center, and I don't think we really do a lot of analytical thinking first about what does that mean. And is it efficiency we're after, it's effectiveness, or is it cost savings, or is it all of the above? Remember, your dispatchers man the front counter, they answer the phones, they take care of residents' needs, they monitor alarms, there are records management people. So they do they wear a variety of hats. If we get rid of the dispatchers and the comm center, then we're gonna have to figure out still how to do those services. I don't think our citizens are not gonna want their alarms monitored, and I don't think Menlo's gonna be prepared to do that. Maybe they are. And I do believe that if we're going to talk about that kind of a change, I think it really needs to be looked at in terms of what we can afford and what we can't afford, and what our community wants, a level of service. Having worked with a couple of major, large contract law enforcement services, when I was the deputy chief at Citrus Heights many, many years ago, we had 105 officers, and our comm center was through the sheriff's department, which was huge. We were constantly engaged in dialogue about how do we improve the customer service, how do we maintain control over what that comm center does, how do we make them community oriented. And they had a whole different approach to community policing than the Citrus Heights Police Department did. So if we want to go down that road, I'm certainly capable of doing that and looking at some of those things. I think we first need to ask ourselves, and I think it starts with the budget, what is it we're looking to cut from the police department if need be? And then give me the opportunity to make some presentations to the council as to what that might look like. And you make recommendations or tell me what you would like.
Thank you. All right, I recommend that we move on. Oh,
Yeah, I would like to just sort of separate those two issues. When we talk about the fact that we pay for dispatch and hence we pay for the alarm system, my problem with that is that everybody pays for dispatch, but only some people get the alarm service. And I'd be perfectly comfortable saying, hey, yeah, I want to have the best dispatch service, and I want us to keep it in the town, but I think we all ought to pay for it. And if some of us are getting more service than others, it's just like the garbage can issue. If I got a bigger garbage can, I pay more. So if I've got an alarm connection, I should pay more than the person who doesn't.
thank you. All right, I'd like to move on to community services because we'll go as long as we need to, but we've targeted a 4 o'clock conclusion. So Deborah and I guess Mike?
Mayor and council members, as Councilmember Lewis already noted, one of the proposals as part of this staff budget is to consolidate 3 previous departments, planning, building, and public works, into one, community services. And the reason for this is several. Number one is that we felt it would help promote a more of a teamwork in working together. Although planning, building, and public works are pretty distinct type functions, we're all related and we're all interrelated. And we felt that by doing this, this would also equate to better service to the customers as well. Lisa Costa-Sanders will be presenting the mission, the services, and the goals for planning. And then following Lisa, I will be doing the same for building and public works.
Good afternoon. The mission of the planning department is to ensure compliance with the town's general plan and municipal code, as well as state planning and zoning laws, and that'll include the Subdivision Map Act and the California Environmental Quality Act. And it's also very important to the planning department to provide consistent, high-quality customer service. Our core services respond to customer inquiries, be from architect, resident, somebody that wants to purchase a home, realtors. We're also providing the arborist services under planning. We review all new plans for building and construction for conformance with the zoning code as well as the general plan. And we prepare staff reports and make recommendations to the planning commission, the general plan committee, and the city council. Under the category of mandated services, there are some annual reports that we're required to file with the state, mostly related to housing reports.
Like the housing element or something?
Well, they have a inventory, how many new units a year and how many affordable. The current staffing level, these are all contract positions. The town arborist is here about half-time. The town planner is here about 20 hours a month, and that's really varies depending on the project. So right now, it's at a higher level of service because he's working on the library project. The deputy town planner, which is myself, about 40 hours a month. Again, that varies depending on how many projects we're working on at the time. The senior planner, we just use on an as-needed basis to review new home plans. And the associate planner is something, after discussing with the former city manager, in order to expand our ability to provide customer service at the counter, we've expanded that staff level to 3 days a week. It was previously 2 days a week. So the associate planners here about 96 hours a month, and they're the ones that are really interacting with the public on a day-to-day basis and reviewing plans, also assisting me in preparing staff reports to the planning commission. Then the administrative assistants just as needed, helping out with minutes. Our goals for this next fiscal year, and Michael will touch on this a little bit more in the public works section, but we're going to look at doing kind of simplified general plan update and specifically focusing on the circulation element where we can get some policies that will assist us when other communities are doing their EIRs. We can have some circulation policies in there that they can tie off, and we can hopefully get some good mitigation out of those projects. There's also a few items that are mandated by state law that we need to update in the general plan. Another item is to process the entitlements necessary for the new library, and that's ongoing right now. We're currently working with the Planning Commission to update the Heritage Tree Ordinance. And then ongoing would be attending the regional housing needs meetings and providing information as necessary for the housing element update process. We'd also like to continue to provide informational handouts and update the planning section. We recently added the zoning map to the planning website, so I think that's very helpful. We'd like to continue to add more information on the website. And then as a part of the Heritage Tree Ordinance, we'd like to add more written standards for heritage tree protection during construction. Be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions from the council? Okay.
I do.
Okay, great.
So, I think in the core services, since you're doing the arbor services and zoning code,